Hey guys, what's up? My name's Arnav Roy, and this is Celtics Talk. So the big thing that we have to address for the Celtics as of now is the summer moves. First, the draft. Next, the big trade. So the draft, they got Kelly Olynk by trading up with the Mavericks, and they received Colton Iverson after giving some cash considerations to the Indiana Pacers. These were two great picks. The Celtics have consistently struggled in rebounding. Last year they were 29th in rebounding, and when you're trying to be a defensive-minded team, if defense is your identity, you have to rebound the ball. I mean, you can play 20 seconds of great defense, but if you don't ultimately grab that rebound, there's no point in playing that good defense because it creates second opportunities for your opponent and allows them to reset. Olynk is a guy very similar to similar story with Anthony Davis. In terms of in high school, he was a guard until his junior year. He was like 6'2" until his junior year, and then he rose up 8 inches. So he has the ability in the half court to put the ball on the floor and make a move and drive to the basket. I don't see him as going coast to coast, but in the half court, the ability for a big man his size to do that is pretty good. Olynk was a great pick. He was first team All NBA in the summer league, and if he had been given consistent minutes, he probably could have averaged like 25 points a game. So he played well. I also thought Colton Iverson was a great pick. Colton brings an aspect that the Celtics haven't had in the last 6 or 7 years. It's a guy he's going to rebound, he's going to work hard on the boards, and he's very defensive minded. He'll shoot when he needs to, he'll finish when he needs to. But the ability to really crash the offensive glass, I thought was a great skill. As of now, he has signed with a Turkish team in Turkey for 2 years. Hopefully I'm pretty sure he has an opt-out plan. I think after the first year he wanted to come back to the NBA, and the Celtics still hold his rights. I would have liked to see him on the opening day roster, I'll be honest. I mean, this is a guy who could be a great power forward off the bench. It's hard to often pick guys that are good off the bench, but like a Keon Dooling 4 or 5 years ago was a great off the bench point guard. It's just what he was, and I see Colton right fitting that description. Off the bench forward. Big trade happened. The main pieces are Jason Terry, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce in exchange for Marshawn Brooks, Keith Bogans, Chris Humphries, Gerald Wallace, and a number of 3 draft picks in the future, first-round draft picks. Listen, I don't like this deal just because I'm a diehard Celtics fan. I love what Paul Pierce did, staying 15 years. I love what Kevin has brought in terms of the culture and changing and bringing Celtics pride back. I felt like they shouldn't have let that go. I mean, the Celtics should have been a classy organization and worked around those veterans to create a team that can compete. The Celtics really had the option of doing something very similar to what Brooklyn has done in terms of having younger guys lead this team and then having the Pierce, KG, and Terry have more of a as Paul Pierce said, glorified role player positions. The way you could have done this was by getting a true center. And probably the second best center on the market in the free agent this summer, outside of Dwight Howard, was Al Jefferson. Al averaged like 19 points and 8 rebounds last season. This guy can score and he can rebound. He's a true center. And I felt the Celtics should have signed and traded with him, giving up a guy like a Brandon Bass, a Jordan Crawford, maybe a Courtney Lee. Now look at this lineup. You have Rondo, Bradley, Green, Sullinger, Jefferson. Now off the bench, you can get, if you go strictly with last year's roster, you would get a guy like Terrence Williams, who's a very good off the bench point guard. Or, if you wanted, you could still get Phil Pressey at the point. You still have, depending on who you sign and trade with, but you still have a Jason Terry, you still have a Paul Pierce, you still have a Kevin Garnett, and then you still have a Shavlik Randolph or a Kelly Olynk. And for me, that would have been the best trade. Have a young group of core starting players, but one of the best benches in the league. A bench would come in Jason Terry, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. That's a bench that can average 35 points a game by themselves. And if you look at the Mavericks in 2011, that was such a good team. They were so deep. Their bench averaged 35 points a game. It was 5th in the NBA, but they ended up winning the championship, beating the Miami Heat. So that's where I felt the Celtics should have gone. They should have, respected what Paul had given to this team all the years and should have been able to create a plan so that they can disappear in the sunset as Celtics. Many talk radio shows have talked about this, but it's same as what happened in the early 90s, in the 91-92 season, when you have these older players, Bird, Parrish, Dennis Johnson played until 1990, where, you could get some trades to get a guy like Chuck Person from Indiana, but you don't do it because you understand that Larry has given everything he has, and you don't want to see Larry in a Indiana Pacers uniform or an Atlanta Hawks uniform. You don't want to see that, and it's going to be weird seeing Pierce and KG in Brooklyn Nets uniforms, and I disagree with what's being done, but if the Celtics are to embrace this rebuilding phase, this is the way to do it. They've gotten a lot of draft picks, which are assets. They've gotten some young talent. So this is the way you do it. As of right now, there are big questions in terms of the fact that they have 16 guys on the roster. How are you going to manage that? For me, I think the Celtics need to really, send a message about who's going to be there on opening day. Who do they want? Like a guy like Gerald Wallace, Brandon Bass, Jordan Crawford. These are 3 guys right there. I don't see them in the Celtics' future. I don't know where these guys fit. And if you have the ability to trade these guys, especially Brandon Bass or even a Gerald Wallace, if you can market them to a team that's contending for a championship, Gerald is a tough case. He has 3 years, $30 million still left. So, in my mind, the only way you can trade him is if he plays a good first half of the season and you trade him away at the trade deadline after marketing him. Um, you know, Brandon Bass is a very underrated player, a defender, a great defender. Really defended Carmelo Anthony well in the first round against New York this past season in 2012, 2013. I think you really need to get those guys out of here. In my mind, I'll give you the 10-man rotation, so to speak, that you would have. You would have Rondo at the point, Avery Bradley, shooting guard, Jeff Green, small forward, Jared Sullinger, power forward, Kelly Olynyk, center. Off the bench, Phil Pressey, either a Marshawn Brooks or a Courtney Lee. Now, right now, small forward would be filled by Gerald Wallace. Let's see how he does. At the power forward, you would have wait, power forward off the bench. Oh, Chris Humphries. That's where I was. Okay, Chris Humphries. And then Shavlik Randolph, or the guy that they signed from Brazil, Favarani. So you could have him. And then, so right there you have, if you include Courtney and Favarani, I wouldn't put them off the bench. I'd rather have Marshawn and Shavlik. But if you have that, that's a 12-man roster. Give or take, you would have a 13 if you have a Fab Melo. That's an okay roster. That's a pretty decent roster. That's a roster where I can see them being, a 20, 25 win team, or a team that's competing for a playoff position at a 7 or 8 seed. The highest I see them with that is a 6 seed. But listen, when you have a Rondo, you have a Jeff Green, even an Avery Bradley. People forget Avery Bradley was a number 1 high school recruit. He was, like in 2009, he's a number 1 high school recruit. He was projected to be better than John Wall. So a kid can play defense. The other big move that the Celtics made was adding Brad Stevens at the head coach. I love this move. One of the things that I was telling people was, if you bring in a Lionel Hollins, a Mo Cheeks, a Vinny Del Negro, like, they've been to other franchises. They've done this gig. They're not going to buy in. And if you bring one of those guys in for a rebuilding phase, it just seems like it's penned up for disaster. It's just going to be a 2 or 3 year thing where everything they say is positive. We're moving in the right direction. We're doing all this thing, but really they don't have a lot of heart into it. When you bring in a guy like Brad Stevens, a guy who has no NBA experience, you can teach him the Celtics way, and he has young energy. He's here to prove himself. The other thing I like about him is he relies on statistics and analytics. While a lot of college coach things don't translate to the NBA, the one thing I like about that is that he relies on statistics and analyzing film. That doesn't change. There can be different lingual, pick and rolls are supposedly totally different from college game to the pro game, but the ability to look at numbers, rebounding numbers, shooting efficiency numbers, all those, what plays and what sets are working, that doesn't change. I also like that he doesn't have an ego. The big thing with college coaches and college programs is they're built around the coach. You think about a Mike, Coach K at Duke, a Jim Boeheim at Syracuse, a John Calipari at Kentucky. Guys are going to those teams because of the coach. because they know, hey, Coach Cal has the ability to coach guys and put them in positions to be successful in the NBA and to get drafted into the NBA. Brad Stevens did not have that big of an ego. I mean, and beyond that, that's, and the transition, that's why guys like Rick Pitino and John Calipari were not successful in the NBA. It's because they had that ego. Rick Pitino said afterwards on his time in Boston, he said, the one thing I regret is I should have been less humble. And so Stevens doesn't have an ego. He's not going to have that problem transitioning into the NBA where, in the NBA, everything is about the players. It's not about the coach. So I love it. I like Brad Stevens. We'll see what the Celtics do with the moves that are coming about. But listen, this is an unclear phase right now in the Celtics timeline. There's a lot of things that they can do and Danny can do to put this team to be successful. The one thing I tell people is this is very similar to the situation in 06-07, where you have all these young guys, you've got a lot of assets in terms of draft picks. Try to now use those to get some good veteran players. And what the Celtics did then was they got guys, obviously they had Pierce, but they got two other guys, really I would say at their prime, when they're 30, 31, they're on the brink of maybe being old in 3 or 4 years, but, from age 30 to 32, 33, these guys could play. And I would say the Celtics should try something very similar to what they did back then. Let's look at some of the guys that are, 28, 29. I mean, we have some 27, 28-year-olds, Rondo, Green, Courtney Lee. But let's get some really good ones. And let's see who develops and use those trade assets, those things, to really start looking at getting guys that are experienced and are ready to take their play to the next level. And, I love Kelly Olynk, but I think the biggest thing this team is missing is a center with experience. And like I said, I really like Al Jefferson. I really liked Juwan Blair. He now has signed with the Mavericks, but a Rondo, Green, and a good center core mixed in with a Bradley, a Jared Sullinger, and then you have to build in some guys off the bench. That's a competing team in the Eastern Conference. I mean, right now you look at the Eastern Conference. You've got Miami. You've got Chicago. We'll see how good they are. You've got Indiana, Brooklyn, New York. The Pistons look good with the addition of Jennings. Now with that young talent of a Andre Drummond, a Greg Monroe, a Caldwell Pope. So that's a team you'll be looking at. The Cavaliers, if Bynum is healthy, that's a team you're looking at. Outside of that, and then the Wizards are also a great team. They played a lot better once John Wall came back in the second half of the season. So if you look at those 8 teams as your teams, playoff teams going in, I mean, the Celtics could compete with that. The Celtics could. It's going to take some breakout seasons. I mean, Rondo might have to average 17 and 11 this season. Green might have to average, 22 points a game. Bradley has to be more consistent offensively. Sully's got to show that he can be a double-double guy. But, don't count this team out. I mean, this is a team that could show some surprise to other people, but they could also go the other way and be a 31 team. I'm going to stop right there. That's 20 minutes. Thank you, guys.